And here we all are. So a cat just swore, but you won't hear it because it'll have been cut out. But here we are all back again with the lovely Jo Matthews, nurse practitioner, Kat, and myself, Sam. This has just been such a fascinating and interesting subject. So we're going to come back again to empathy around and understanding around people who suffer anxiety, depression, PTSD, but any kind of post-traumatic reaction or response. Would you say response or reaction, Jo?
Response.
Which is a normal, human, natural thing to do, isn't it? Is to respond to something horrific that's either you've witnessed or is happening to you.
Yeah, and you know, horrific is pretty subjective. Like I was mentioning before, it's easy, I think, for people to look at veterans who've been to war and kind of, you know, imagine what it has to be for them when they, you know, in those situations, you know, they're seeing their friends die. Humvees are being blown up, all that kind of stuff. But when someone here, you know, in the States who has experienced, I think it's hard for people to understand that it's how a person responds to an external situation. It could be spinning out in the middle of a intersection on the ice that person is fearful of wrecking and dying in that situation, right? So after this accident or just spin out, even if they weren't hurt, creates a lot of anxiety. You know, they may not be able to feel comfortable in a car again. And if this persists beyond a certain point, then we can call this is PTSD. So a traumatic event is how a person internalizes it. And it can be, and I think that's where a lot of people feel that maybe that there's not a lot of empathy for people in an abusive relationship that are or have gotten out of an abusive relationship and still have all this anxiety and depression and which, by the way, depressive symptoms and anxiety symptoms and PTSD have a lot of overlapping symptoms, right? You know, that they can't just get on with their life. They're out of it now. Well, this is something that was very traumatic to them. You know, someone from the outside looking in, it's hard for them to put them in their place because they haven't experienced that.
And I suppose the things we see films about war, you know, for decades. So we have a knowledge around. And not just in the army, say in police forces and things as well. So we can grasp that. We can grasp that they face things. They see death. They see destruction. They see the worst of us as human beings on a daily basis. And I suppose the thing is, it's very hard. We know, because this is what we're trying to highlight, that it's very hard for people who have not. Where domestic abuse and violence hasn't touched their world
or they think it hasn't.
Or they think it hasn't, to understand that actually it's that same it's hard for them to understand that you can be living with somebody who is actually the worst of humankind. But it's in a love relationship, and that can actually exist, that it's not to do with, you know, poverty or crime, like politics or, you know, those big, huge things, that it can be as everyday as that.
There seems to be a difference when you're in survival and you're just there trying to get through the day, and when you actually leave the situation and you're out of it, and what that becomes.
Yes.
You seem to have more trouble outside than inside of it.
Moment, so survival is key, right? And then when you're out, you're looking back on things in retrospect. And so that's where you're processing a lot of those thoughts and feelings and
Yeah, and they don't seem to like make sense. I think also when you're out, like all of a sudden, something.
And that's where, then you start really also, I think, really processing a lot of that shame and guilt that you feel having been in that situation, keeping your kids in that situation for as long as you were in that situation, all that.
And I suppose that's what comes with the acknowledgement, the self-acknowledgement. So when you're in survival, all you're literally thinking about is surviving. So all of that stuff, I suppose, just lies unprocessed for years, does it? And so then you've almost, I get what you're saying, Kat and Joe, then you've sort of almost got this tsunami of stuff to process that you haven't been able to because you've literally been in survival mode. So, maybe that's why it hits you like a truck.
And that's why I liked what Joe said in another one of our videos was about having a lump, up underneath the carpet, and trying to act like it wasn't there. And, I think as soon as you can, even if you're in these relationships, and you can start to say, well, how do I feel about this? And not base your opinion on what somebody in the outside world is telling you how you should feel, then you start to get connected to self, because self is important. Because if you don't understand self and you don't understand how I feel in this situation, because quite honestly, I'm a really sensitive person, so I may be more sensitive than somebody else who would be like, that doesn't bother me. I could care less if somebody did that. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, that's the difficulties that we have to, understand and manage. And if we are consistently looking outward, well, if society would just support me, if you know what I'm saying, if they would just do, because they don't. In a lot of ways. I mean, it's getting better, but.
No, I agree, Kat. And one of the things I was wondering with Joe, so I mean, we've talked about medication and, how helpful that can be. It physically takes, some of the physical symptoms away so that your brain can start to process. But are there other therapies? I mean, there's talking therapies and there's like CBT and things. I mean, are there other things that...
Oh, absolutely.
Because for people to ask people sometimes to deal with this on their own, there is no shame in asking for help, and actually doing it on your own can seem so overwhelming that just that little bit of assistance can mean the world of difference, can't it?
And like we were mentioning before, how kind of the body keeps track of that trauma, right? It keeps score and it stores away in our body. EMDR and brain spotting are a couple of different therapy modalities that help kind of unlock those little compartments in your brain, allow that to come to the surface and be able to process that.
I've never heard of that last one you said. What was that last one?
Brain spotting. Yeah, it's almost like EMDR in a sense, and the therapist has like a long pointer, and that has maybe a little fuzzy ball on the end of it, and they take it back and forth across your visual field, and your body, when it hits a point, and as you're following it, what happens is that your body, when it hits a trigger in your brain, okay, across your visual field, your body will give off these little micro expressions. Like you might twitch, you might move, something in your body adjusts. And when they finally have identified a spot, they will hold it there and they will have you focus on that little ball and just kind of pay attention to the sensations that you're feeling in your body, what words, what emotions, and all that are kind of coming to the surface. There's kind of very little talking on the therapist part. They encourage you, if you feel comfortable, to say what you're feeling, what emotions are coming to surface, what thoughts, what words, and then kind of able to process that afterwards.
Sounds fantastic.
In a lot of sense, 'cause I'm a Reiki practitioner, and I find this true with when I do Reiki as well, is that it allows a lot of these sensations to be released throughout the body. Emotions, I've had people come off my table just in tears and talking about how they haven't thought about a certain somebody in their life that they were close to in such a long time, and what that connection meant to them, or what just anything that has happened in their life that they hadn't thought about or talked about in a really long time, and come to the surface and just kind of floods them, and we're able to sit and process through that after the session.
I did do EMDR, and it was fascinating to me how it helped things kind of flow down, things that bothered me, and all of a sudden, talking about it and doing the EMDR, the paddles, really helped it just subside. But there was looks that they were looking for in watching me. And I didn't know that at the time. I found that out later, which I think is really interesting. So that brain spot sounds...
I actually had opportunity when I was in my graduate program to observe a brain spotting session on one of the other students that were with us. And then I had an opportunity to experience it in a private session. And I'm open to whatever. And so I went in there with an open mind, and I wasn't really sure what to expect within myself, I guess. And within like 5 minutes, I was crying. I'm like, I don't even know why I'm crying. I don't know what's happening right now. But it was funny because what came out for me was feeling like my voice had kind of been taken away from me in past relationships, and how I struggle even today sometimes expressing the way I feel or what have you, and just communication, having good communication and all that. It was really kind of interesting what surfaced in me. I was not expecting that.
Well, I want to go. I want to do brain spotting now. I want to have a go because it just makes so much sense.
Have a go.
It just makes so much sense to me. Our brain is a computer. And we know that our brain needs, our computers need to be, they need updates. It needs to process. They are word processors, and I think for us to feel sort of embarrassed or shameful or whatever about the fact that, sometimes we just need to a bit of reprocessing, a bit of an update on our brains, especially if we've experienced something that's, a bit out of the ordinary, as in trauma, it should be the same as blowing your nose when it's blocked, really. It just makes sense. And I think the more different therapies and stuff that are around for people, or different avenues for them to go down, you can find something that suits you, that you're comfortable with, because not everybody's likes talking therapy, or not everybody likes CBT, or or their brain computer, it's like, that's not the update I need. It's not going to work for mine. But have you got any more like that up your sleeve? It's all very exciting.
Well, I'm
listen to that voice.
Actually a big advocate for a lot of the alternative treatments that are out there and are being researched. Actually, have been researched for long time, and that's the psychedelic assisted therapies that are out there.
Oh wow! What you like? You're talking magic mushrooms or LSD?
There's LSD. Right now, what's big is the psilocybin and MDMA treatments that they're doing for PTSD. I've actually had my own personal experience with ayahuasca. I know I had a Navy SEAL on my caseload when I was at the National Intrepid Center, and he went out of country and he did Iboga and he did the DMT, the Bufu frog stuff. And
oh yeah, the liquid with the poison frog thing. Okay.
Now he has his own nonprofit organization that he helps veterans and to get access that information, access funds to attend these retreats, and all that. And he's very proactive in that regard. And that
Wow,
he's doing an awesome job. But I actually participated in an ayahuasca ceremony, and I did so because I had a former soldier that called me, and he'd been out of the military for years, and he'd been really struggling, and he'd tried the medications and he's tried the psychotherapies and not liking, it's not working for him. He'd really grown spiritually from the time I'd known him to this point. And he was very active in his meditation, Wim Hof breathing exercises. He did all these things for himself. He was very proactive in that regard. And he had come across an ayahuasca retreat in Orlando, Florida. And he was really curious about it. He'd done a lot of research looking into it and was wanting to try it, but he wasn't wanting to do it by himself. And so he called me after we'd kind of been out of touch for a few years, and he's, we're kind of catching up, and he's like, so this is what's going on with me. It's been a really bad year for me, and I've done all these things, and I'm looking at doing this. What do you know about it? And I was like, well, I've heard of it. I know very little at this point. I didn't do a lot of research into it. I have a son that has done a lot of research into it. And he's like, well, I don't want to do it by myself. You should come down with me. And I'm like, what? I can't do that. like, one, I've never done anything like that in my life. And I always had this, stance being in the medical field, like, stay away from that kind of stuff. It's not good for you. And at least recreationally, it's not good for you. And so he kind of, we dove into the research, and we watched podcasts, and we looked at research papers and documentaries and all that. And I talked to a shaman friend of mine here in Spokane that does psilocybin retreats. And I talked to a few other people, talked to my son, and I finally came to a point where I said, okay, I'll come. I'll get my flight. And I had like 10 days or something like that to prepare for the ceremony. Which with ayahuasca, because how it interacts within your body, you have to have a very strict diet. So we had to follow a very strict diet going into the ceremony, and then throughout that retreat weekend. But I tell you, there was people from all walks of life, from as young as 21 as probably as old as my parents, if not older, coming there to resolve all sorts of issues. There were some people that were really there to work out some deep trauma. There was a veteran there. I think that was his 9th or 10th ayahuasca ceremony that he was doing. He was back-to-back 4 deployments, Afghanistan, Iraq. And so it was facilitated by a shaman from Ecuador. It was very beautiful. I felt very safe there. They did a very good job of doing a medical background, psychiatric evaluation on you. There's nurses, paramedics, EMTs, doctors volunteered their time throughout the ceremony weekend to provide support. All the sitters for you were all EMTs or paramedics that were there. So it was very nice. They were very good at explaining the process to you. They sent out a workbook ahead of time so you could kind of work through what it was that you wanted from the experience. And I have to say that, I put my work into it. I did the workbook, everything that I put down there that I was hoping to get from my experience, I got. It was the most profound spiritual experience I have ever experienced, ever. And I left there just feeling an abundance of love and joy and acceptance. I've never felt so at peace with myself and the world around me. And this has been helping veterans. Ayahuasca, iboga. There's other forms. There's kambo, which is a secretion of a Amazonian tree frog. It's not a psychedelic, but it does provide a very calming effect for you. That it's turning people's lives around. It really is. Like that Navy SEAL. That friend of mine, it literally saved his life, saved his marriage, saved his family.
Well, I think that's it. I think that's absolutely amazing. And, you know, for us maybe as human beings to come full circle and look at some of the older medicines as well that have been around for centuries, you know, before they became monetized. But, you know, opium and heroin and all those opioids are used every day now. Just we don't even think about it, you know. But they at some point they started at the same root. But the fact that these treatments are holistic and are given such care and respect, I just think is fabulous. And it's so enabling. It's about enabling people rather than keeping them in a place of need. It just sounds so enabling and so empowering and so, it sounds fabulous. It really does.
It was amazing.
I'm jealous.
It was amazing.
You know, and I think this is, you know, the value of talking and opening up and, you know, letting other people understand that they're not alone and that there's stuff out there that can help them. And they can plug into all kinds of different ways. There's not just, you got to go this way and you got to do this and you got to do that. And in order to get somewhere and, you know, to have empathy for others that are suffering, no matter what their suffering looks like to you, still suffering for them. And I think all of that is important if there's ways out. To help others. I think, you know, that's what the value of us all talking is, and having good conversations, which this one has been. And
it's been fabulous.
I'm hoping Joe will come back.
Joe. Yes, please do.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
So I think we'll wind this one up, and we'll see you on the other side. Jeremiah was a bullfrog. Was a good friend of mine.
I adore you.
Bye.
Now, if you like our content, please comment, like, subscribe, share, and if you want to see some more, you have to hit that bell down there below. So you can check us out on Patreon or on your favourite podcast servers, providers, whatever. So we would like to see you there if you'd like to see us.